You'll see there's a list of ingredients on your healthy breakfast options, and breakfast should be a good, nourishing start to the day. There's a lot of research that's been done that a very poor breakfast, or just a toast and margarine and a cuppa, doesn't set you up well for the day. That they've found that children do far better at school when they start the day with a good, nourishing breakfast, and adults do too. They've even found that accidents are more prone with people that don't start the day with good brain power. And so we're just going to have a quick look first at some of the options that you can use, and I often use a little bit of every one of these options because they're just loaded with great nutrition. And if you start with a whole grain, and there's a variety there on your list, and those grains, it's quite nice to have a variety of those grains, not monopolise on just one thing like wheat.
Excuse me, Julie, are you saying that you have a prepared mixture already of most of these grains?
Yes, if I'm going to have rice, I will cook generally a couple of days worth of rice, and I'll have some rice for that morning. I'm going to show you another oat one that I might have, and yeah, so I'll pick a grain that I'm going to have for the day, and as I say, I do vary it, two or three different types of grain for a week. I add to that seeds because they're like sort of little nutrition bombs. They're loaded with goodness and good fats. And I know fats are probably a word that we don't want to associate with, but these essential good fats are really good for our bodies, and they're in little minute amounts which do good for our bodies. It's not, you're not having a lot. Just a tablespoon of those seeds is wonderful to add to your breakfast. You can have the pumpkin or the sunflower. The linseed needs to be ground, otherwise you won't digest it. Chia seeds need to be soaked overnight to make them palatable. And you can add also a few nuts to your topping over your grain. Almonds and walnuts and Brazils especially are very good quality. You've got minerals and another good source of good fats. Dried fruits, just to make it sweeter for you. And also they've got nourishment in your raisins and apricots and dates. You've got fibre and iron and vitamin A and lots of goodness there. Fresh fruit. Tin fruit can be nice for people, but really fresh. It's not processed at all. It's got all its nourishment there, all the vitamins. And your berries, they're like small little nutrient bombs as well. We're just about over our berry season, but do get the frozen ones because they sure are full of lots of good antioxidants. You've got a variety of milks you can choose from, and we're going to have a table set up for you to try the different milks: soy, almond, rice and oat. And then if you need sweeteners, but you'll find that often with your fruit and your dried fruit that you don't need any more sweet, but if you do, there's honey and maple syrup or dates. What they can purify dates to add. Okay, that breakfast, when you add little bits like that to your breakfast and alter it, don't just monopolise on one particular thing with your seeds and that either, or your nuts. Vary those over your week, and you don't have to have a whole heap. Just because a small amount is very nutritious, don't think you've got to have a half a bucket full of them a day, because it'll just load you down and it won't be good at all. And that breakfast is full of carbohydrates, absolutely chock-a-block. Now, I know that carbohydrates get a very bad rap these days, don't they? But it's the simple carbs. Those are the ones that are no good for us. God made those grains with the fibre on the outside and the germ already in it with nutrients and things like vitamin E. The fibre, we've already seen one of our presentations by Dr. Thomas, is so essential for our health. And what it does is it also, the fibre helps us to digest that food slowly and give off the energy, because we get energy from carbs, and it gives it off slowly over several hours, which is much more beneficial than the simple carbs, which mankind thinks they're smarter, and they take off the fibre and they take off the wheat germ, so you're just left with a bit of starch, which gives you a high spike of energy, and then it's gone in a very short space of time, and you're left hungry again. Complex carbohydrates are where it's at. You know, some of those top athletes will load down with their carbohydrates to give them their energy and their endurance for the day. A good breakfast will last you a good 5 hours. You won't be hungry. Starting off the day with something like that. And your brain runs on carbohydrates as well. Okay, so have you ever heard of the blue zones? Areas of the world where they've found that these pockets around the world, certain peoples, they live longer and healthier than the rest of the population of the world. There's 5 of them they've found. There's one in Italy, there's one in Greece, there's one in Costa Rica, Japan, and in Loma Linda in America. And they all have one thing in common. They're very plant-based, and 50 to 80% of their diet is complex carbohydrates. So if you load down with these sort of things, these good carbohydrates, you're onto a good thing. So I'm just going to do a simple breakfast, because a lot of us women don't want to spend lots of time first thing in the morning doing a breakfast, do we? So I'm going to demonstrate, and I don't have to cook a thing, the overnight oats. I've also put in a quinoa breakfast. Has anybody ever tried quinoa? No hands. One hand. Oh, that's my husband.
Excuse me, how many of these whole grains actually need to be prepared beforehand? I.e., you can't just take them out of the packet and use them.
No, you'd have to cook them. You'd have to cook your rice. I tell you what, you can get sorghum wheat bix from the gluten-free section of your supermarket. Quinoa you'd have to cook, but it only takes about 15 minutes. And amaranth cooked, that takes a very short time too. You could get wheat bix. My husband I think he must have been weaned onto wheat bix. I can't get him off it. But what I do is add the seeds and the nuts and the soya milk, and he adds the fruit, and he gets that extra nutrition as well. Oats, you can have that as muesli, or I'm going to just do a simple overnight oat soak today. And buckwheat, that takes a short time to cook. So, yeah. All right. The quinoa, that's right, I was talking about the quinoa. Quinoa's got a funny taste. And so I find that the other recipe, the quinoa recipe, I'm not going to demonstrate that today because we haven't got enough time. But I put that recipe in because quinoa is extremely nutritious. It's actually, it's got all the amino acids to make up a full protein, which is an unusual thing for a grain. It's sort of classed as one of those superfoods. So that recipe there, I found that quinoa's got an unusual taste, which I don't like. But when I soak it overnight, and then I put it into a very fine sieve, and then run the cold water over it until it runs clear. It look a bit milky to start with. I run it over it, make it clear, and then I cook it. And it takes about 15 minutes. And that recipe, it just tastes yum.